Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to call to order the Planning and Heritage Committee. Prior to the start of the meeting, I would like us to pause and reflect on the passing of Martha Henry. The artistic director of the Stratford Festival, Anthony Cimolino, has called Miss Henry a champion, a mentor, a pioneer, one of the most influential leaders in the history of the Stratford Festival. The City of Stratford's thoughts are with Miss Henry's family, friends, and her family at the Stratford Festival. Let's take a moment, please. Thank you. Item number 2, disclosures of pecuniary interests or the general nature thereof. Seeing none. Item 3, delegations. There are none scheduled. The next item is an addendum to the agenda for tonight's meeting, has been circulated, and there is a motion that the correspondence from Airbnb dated October the 15th, 2021, in response to the draft comprehensive zoning bylaw for the City of Stratford and its short-term rental regulations be received for information. May I have a mover for that addendum? And that's moved by Councillor Henderson and second by Councillor Clifford. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to item 4.1, a report for the Manager of Planning. And I'm going to invite Ms. Bridge, Manager of Planning, to make a brief presentation with regards to the final draft comprehensive zone bylaw for the City of Stratford. Ms. Bridge, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Through the chair, good evening. I'm just going to share my screen there and just confirming that you can see that slide deck on the screen in front of you.
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. So staff are pleased to bring forward to the Planning and Heritage Committee for consideration the final draft of the city's new comprehensive zoning bylaw. So the comprehensive zoning bylaw is the primary tool to regulate the use of land in the city. The zoning bylaw is a legal document and development must adhere to it. The zoning bylaw divides all land in the city into various zone categories. So this would include categories such as residential, commercial, and industrial. It establishes what uses are permitted and identifies standards about the location, massing, and height of buildings and structures. The new comprehensive zoning bylaw will implement the policies of the city's official plan and provide updated zoning and development standards that reflect new policy and regulatory initiatives at the provincial and city level. The effect of the proposed comprehensive zoning bylaw will be to repeal and replace all existing zoning bylaws in the city with a new modern zoning bylaw that addresses current and future planning challenges. As mentioned, one of the key changes made to this comprehensive zoning bylaw has been with respect to modernization. So a zoning bylaw is a fairly technical document, and so modernization helps to improve the usability of the document. So some of the changes that have been made have been wayfinding features. So this includes items such as hyperlinks throughout the document. There is now a separate section for parking and loading. The defined terms have been italicized for clarity. Illustrations have been included to help aid in interpretation. The zoning provisions have been organized into tables, and the site-specific zones have been organized into a separate section. There also have been a number of new zones introduced in the new zoning bylaw. So one of these is a new industrial zone, and the intent of this zone is to implement the official plans policies for ancillary uses in industrial areas. There is a new theater district zone to reflect the Stratford Festival Theater, a new Grand Trunk Anchor District zone to implement the city's master plan for these lands, and a new agricultural zone to implement the official plan. There also have been zoning changes with respect to the environment. So there is a new open space zone that would apply to known flood erosion and natural heritage features. The Upper Thames River Conservation Authority's regulated area is now shown on the zone maps. And new wellhead protection area regulations have been incorporated to implement the source protection policies of the official plan. There also have been changes made with respect to parking. So this includes updated parking requirements that provide for shared parking in mixed use zones, new parking rates for residential developments, and provisions to consider off-site parking. There are also new accessible parking space requirements and dimensions, new minimum bicycle parking space requirements, and new requirements for visitor parking. There have also been a number of changes to the home occupation provisions, group home provisions, and drive-through requirements. There are new regulations that allow secondary suites, new contemporary definitions such as brew pub and cluster townhouses, and a framework for the city's application of holding and temporary use bylaws. The new zoning bylaw also contains a framework with respect to short-term rental accommodations. So the existing zoning bylaw in the city today allows bed and breakfast establishments and inns, but does not contemplate or permit any other type of short-term rental. So the new bylaw contains a new definition of short-term rental accommodation and associated requirements in zoning regulations. So the short-term rental is really defined as an entire dwelling unit that's used to provide sleeping accommodations for any period of less than 28 consecutive days and is operated by a principal resident. The principal use of that dwelling is intended to remain for residential purposes, and the short-term rental is to be ancillary to the main use. So that short-term rental accommodation use would be subject to a future licensing bylaw and limited to a maximum of 180 days per year. The preparation of the bylaw for adoption has included a comprehensive public consultation process. So this has included public information centers, digital engagement through the Shaping Stratford website, targeted stakeholder consultation, and a statutory public meeting. A comprehensive set of the public comments received and the staff responses are appended to the management report from this evening. So staff recommend adoption of the new comprehensive zoning bylaw, and that while adopting that bylaw, council repeal the existing City of Stratford zoning bylaw, the Perth East zoning bylaw for lands in the City of Stratford, the Perth South zoning bylaw, with the exception of the 2020 annexation lands. Staff have also included a recommendation that council directs staff to initiate the short-term rental licensing bylaw to reflect the short-term rental provisions in the draft comprehensive zoning bylaw. And in addition to these items, there's a few other recommendations that staff have included. One of these is with respect to the Planning Act. So when a municipality adopts a new comprehensive zoning bylaw under the Planning Act, zoning bylaw amendments are restricted for a period of 2 years unless council has resolved otherwise. Because this comprehensive zoning bylaw doesn't pre-zone any lands for development, staff are recommending that council pass a resolution that would permit zoning bylaw amendment applications to be submitted in this 2-year period. The final recommendation that you'll see tonight has to do with 94 Dickens Place, and staff have recommended a site-specific change in the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So in the existing zoning bylaw today, 94 Dickens Place is zoned R51, and in that zoning permission, they are permitted a maximum height of 15 meters and a maximum density of 100 units per hectare. The owner has applied for site plan approval on this site for a 4-story, 34-unit apartment building. And that proposal conforms with all of the requirements of the existing zoning bylaw. The draft comprehensive zoning bylaw does contain transition provisions, but it would require site plan approval to be granted before the bylaw comes into effect. Given the timing, it is unlikely that they'd have site plan approval before the new bylaw comes into effect. And so in order to recognize the resources that have been invested to advance a site plan application for that site today that conforms with the existing zoning, staff have recommended some site-specific zoning for that site to allow them to continue with the proposed development concept. So that is all I have for you formally this evening. I'd be happy to take any questions that the committee might have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Bridge. And certainly I will also recognize that Mr. Lunison is present and may be responding to questions as well. So questions from council. I see Councillor Henderson, Clifford. Just give me a moment here. Henderson, Clifford, Bunting, and Councillor Ingram. Go ahead, Councillor Henderson.
Well, I had quite a few emails from people that are concerned about the 180 days. I just want to make sure I've got this right in my head. My understanding is the 180 days on the principal residence is for the short-term rental only. That if you are renting all year round, you fall under a different section of the zoning bylaw. Is that correct?
Ms. Bridge.
Through the chair, that's correct. So that 180-day limit applies only to short-term rental accommodations that are licensed under our future licensing bylaw.
A follow-up, Councillor Henderson.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Chair. I did talk to staff about this. I was wondering if there's anything that it can be added later. When people are building apartments or condos, if we could have something in there about charging stations for EVs. It's come up quite often this last little while that we are going to have electric cars. So I was talking earlier, like possibly like an amendment to this. I don't expect it right now, but it is an important issue, I believe.
Ms. Bridge.
Through the chair, so Councillor Clifford is correct. Today, the zoning bylaw doesn't contain any requirements for electric vehicle charging stations. Certainly, staff can go away and do some research in terms of best practices as to what other municipalities are doing and look at what the appropriate rates would be relative to the number of parking spaces proposed, and come back with a future amendment to the zoning bylaw that would recommend possible changes with respect to those charging stations.
Thank you, Ms. Bridge. Councillor Bunting and then Ingram.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you very much. Thanks also to staff for this. A lot of work has gone into this for sure. I'm more concerned about the short-term rental situation and the rules and regulations that relate to it. And when it says on page 6 of your report, Alyssa, on page 6 it says about directing staff to prepare a licensing bylaw for short-term rentals. I was wondering, does that mean that the licensing, whatever this bylaw states, will reflect what's already in the comprehensive zoning bylaw as it exists at the moment, or is there room for some movement in there? Because I would like to speak to the situation as I see it, and as many others see it as well, not necessarily on council, but elsewhere in the tourism sector. Could you answer that question if you understand it?
Through the chair, so that future licensing bylaw would need to implement whatever direction council provides with respect to short-term rental accommodations in the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So the comprehensive zoning bylaw would become that parent document that sets out the parameters around where they're permitted and the timeframes around when they're permitted. And then the licensing bylaw would deal with the detailed implementation of that.
Okay, so is there room, say, for instance, if there was an appetite for some amendments to make it other than just the principal owner, something along those lines? Is there an appetite for? If there was an appetite for that, would this be permissible at the formulation of the bylaw stage?
Ms. Bridge.
Through the chair, so that would be subject to council direction. So there has been a previous council resolution that short-term rental accommodations be limited to the principal residence up to 180 days per year. So that's what's reflected in the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So new council direction would be required to make a change to that.
Understood. And at what stage should that take place today, tonight, after we vote on the comprehensive zoning bylaw?
Through the chair, so you have before you tonight the final draft of the zoning bylaw. So it would be ideal to get direction on any changes that the committee might want to consider this evening.
Councillor Bunting, a follow-up?
Yes, with respect to the comprehensive zoning bylaw, is it possible to consider the comprehensive zoning bylaw leaving aside the section of short-term rentals for debate tonight?
I'm looking at the clerk with regards to that question, and I would believe it could be, but I'm looking at the clerk for some direction on that. And the question was, can we leave out the short-term accommodation portion from tonight's voting piece? Or the CAO I'm looking for. Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. I think it would be helpful, sorry, it would be helpful if council could have the debate tonight with respect to the short-term rental accommodations. There are numerous provisions for this in the draft comprehensive zoning bylaw, and it will take some staff time and analysis if there's going to be substantial changes at this point. So subject to the clerk, I am suggesting Councillor Ritzma that if there is a proposal or a discussion on the short-term rental accommodation, perhaps you deal with that first tonight and see what the outcome of that is.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Councillor Bunting, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So would a motion be appropriate at this particular time?
I'm wondering whether we go through council and see if something comes forward from other councillors, and certainly we'll come back to you if a motion, if you would like to make a motion. So Councillor Ingram next.
Thank you. And I just want to start by thanking staff, because this is certainly a new, modern, updated zoning bylaw. It's easier to read. It has a lot of the new technological features incorporated, and the graphics. The graphics are great. Some color, it makes it much easier to read. I'm going to actually talk about parking. So I'm looking at page 140 of the full agenda, which is page 5-8 of the new zoning bylaw, and it's related to parking space dimensions and requirements. Ms. Bridge and I have actually had a bit of a discussion regarding the parking space requirements for residential uses within a private garage, because the parking space is actually reduced for a private garage. But logically, when you get inside an enclosed space, you actually need more space for a car to be able to open your doors, maneuver around. Plus, within the private garages, you have space for storage. The same thing happens when you get into structured parking and underground parking. You have those columns. You actually need a little bit wider space for your parking stall itself to be able to maneuver around the columns or the walls, open your doors, that type of thing. So the reduction in the parking space when you're in a private garage doesn't make any sense to me. Logically, I think, you know, yes, you can use that middle area to sort of park the two cars closer together and be able to open the doors to share that space, but you also need the space along the outside for the walls in order to be able to open the door against the wall, which when you're outside, you have additional space because there is no barrier there when you open your door. So I am wondering about the removal of the minimum width reduction for 2 parking spaces when they're inside a private garage, because it does reduce the amount of space by 0.4 meters, which is a little bit more than a foot. So, you know, maybe 1.5 feet. And Ms. Bridge, maybe you could comment on that.
Sure. So through the chair, just to clarify, Councillor Ingram, so the specific comment is about the minimum width where 2 parking spaces are required?
That's correct, because the single parking space within a private garage is not any different than if it were out in a driveway. It's a regular parking style dimension, the width of it. But when you get 2 parking spaces within a private garage, then it's reduced by that 0.4 meters. And logically, that actually doesn't make any sense when you have 2 cars and you need to be able to open up more doors and you have more enclosed space around you.
Through the chair, thank you. So Jeff Lunison is on the call tonight as well, and I'm just going to ask Jeff to provide any context that he thinks might be applicable to why that reduction was proposed.
Thank you. Through the chair, the requirement for a 2.4 meter wide parking space for a single detached dwelling is what's required by the current bylaw, and so this bylaw continues that regulation. But what this new bylaw does do is it requires 2 parking spaces for a single detached dwelling, whereas the current bylaw only requires 1. So in essence, most single detached dwellings were providing 2 parking spaces, one either in a garage or outside a garage, and one in the driveway leading to the garage. So this bylaw requiring 2.4 meters for both parking spaces is slightly more onerous than what's in the current bylaw, but basically the 2.4 meters is the requirement of the current bylaw. If council believes that it should be wider, then we can certainly change the exemption for single detached dwellings. I think the reason for the exemption for single detached dwellings is really garage widths. They're pretty standardized. So a garage door is 8 feet, approximately 2.4 meters. If you want to get to your parking space in a garage, you have to get through the opening for the garage door. So as I said, that's the rationale behind it. It's really carrying forward the regulation of the current bylaw. But if council believes that the exemption for a single detached dwelling should be not as low as 2.4 meters for the 2 required parking spaces, we can certainly look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Lunison. Follow up, Councillor Ingram?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Lunison, I'm going to point you to section 5.2B, and the text of the bylaw states the minimum dimensions of a parking space located in a private garage shall be 5.6 meters in length, and the minimum width shall be 2.8 meters where 1 parking space is provided, and the minimum width shall be 5.4 meters where 2 parking spaces are provided. So it does actually refer to the parking space width within a parking garage being 2.8, and then it reduces it for 2 parking spaces to 5.4 meters.
My apologies. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. If we continue forward with the same rationale, it should be 5.6 meters.
Absolutely, yes. And that was my point, in that the reduction of the 0.4 meters, sorry, I believe I just froze there for a moment. The reduction in the 0.4 meters logically does not make any sense to me. So I would like either the minimum width to be increased to the 5.6 meters, or just that entire clause to be removed from the bylaw, because the reduction doesn't make any sense.
I guess we're in the hands of the committee a little bit. We can take either approach. If we remove it entirely, each parking space will be 2.4 meters. If we change the regulation from 5.4 to 5.6, we get to the same place. It really in your hands how you want to proceed.
Yes, and I'm only speaking about removing 5.2B2, not all of section 5.2B.
Understood.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Ingram, to that end, would you like to put that in a motion form, or?
You know, yeah, I will. Sorry, I've just mumbled my words there. Here's what I would suggest, that section 5.2b state that 5.2b1 state that the minimum width shall be 2.8 meters for parking spaces provided within a private garage, and that 5.2b3 be renumbered to be 5.2b2.
Can you go back to the, you froze there just at the tail end of the 5.b1 piece.
Oh, 5.2b1 be reworded to say that the minimum width of a parking stall within a private garage shall be 2.8 meters.
And then the renumbering of
2b3.
Yes,
Yes,
to 2.
yes, thank you.
Is there a seconder for that item? Councillor Basilakos, thank you. Discussion on that. Councillor Henderson.
Did you say what page that's actually on? Because I've been scrolling through trying to find it. If you don't mind.
Page 5-8.
In the agenda,
Councillor Henderson, do you have the complete document in front of you? Because it is 5-8.
What page have you got it on?
It's section 5.
Right, but what
Under,
page?
it's under, well, it's at the very bottom, it's 5-8.
No, at the top, you know where it says the PDF, it says the page numbers.
Have that
Can-
on my.
Councillor Henderson, that would be 146.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. I'll just give Councillor Henderson a chance. Have you found that?
Yes, I have. Thank you very much for your help.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion on that? Councillor Gaffney and then Councillor Seven. And these are comments towards the motion on the floor. Councillor Gaffney.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. You're right. I have other comments, so
Thank
I'm ready to vote on what's on the.
Thank you. Councillor Seven, are you in the same situation?
No, I have a question related to the motion.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just had a question. If Mr. Lunison, would you be able to just clarify that this would still, you talked about a standard garage door width. This would still be in line with the standardized garage door width and things like that?
To the chair, yes, Councillor Wood. That provision is covered under what is currently 5.2b III, and that's the standard size for a garage door. And the councillor's resolution doesn't change that provision.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seven. Any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor? I'm looking to the clerk and you're fine with that?
As through the chair, if I could just clarify, so the motion on the floor is that section 5.2b.1 be amended to state the minimum width of a parking stall in a parking garage be 2.8 meters. That section 5.2b.2 be removed, and that the remainder of the section be renumbered.
And Councillor Ingram, thank you. Okay, no further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's unanimous. Thank you. And I'll go to Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, a couple couple little things. I don't know if references to the workman's or to the OMB need to be changed to the LPAT, because I found at least one continuing reference to OMB.
I'll ask Ms. Bridge to respond to that.
Through the chair, good catch, Councillor Gaffney. Yes, references to the OMB will need to be cleaned up to reference the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Follow up, Councillor Gaffney?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thing is, I wonder if the suggestion, which I agree with 100% with that Councillor Clifford made, should be put in the form of a motion for step.
Yeah, and I was going to come back to Councillor Bunting. Do you have something that you'd like to move at this time, Councillor Bunting?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I would like to make a motion that the section relating to the primary resident only be amended to allow a homeowner in the city of Stratford to operate a short-term rental at another location within the city.
And is there a seconder for that, Councillor Gaffney? Did you, Councillor Clifford is, okay, thank you. Discussion. Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Ingram.
I would not be supporting that motion simply because we've had this discussion, quite in depth previously. We've had legal opinion on it. We've played around with it, and it's still, it speaks to, one, the pressure that puts on our availability of rentals. And I know that we're talking about tourism, but I would, if anything, in the last little while, finding people who could work in the tourism industry and find affordable rentals in Stratford has gotten even worse, and is one of the reasons why it's difficult to find people to work in Stratford. And so the pressure that could put on long-term rentals is significant. But the other part of it too is we continue to have an issue where having it off-site and not being the principal residence makes it difficult to then control noise issues, neighborhood issues, things like that. And it also just increases the commercial activity in a residential zone, which is something that we want to try to manage.
Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos. Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. So I'll echo
You just froze again.
Councillor Vasilakos's point without restating them. Oh my goodness, my connection is just terrible tonight. I will echo those comments without restating them. I also feel like the amendment would be a nightmare for enforcement for staff, and that's something that I'm thinking about as we're going through these provisions. So I also will not be supporting that motion.
Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question of staff. If I have a short-term rental and I rent it out, can I be in that house when I'm renting it out? Like, if I'm not there, I'm not there. I'd like a clarification. If I own the house and I rent it for short term, am I supposed to be in the house, or do I have to be out of the house as the owner?
Ms. Bridge.
Through the chair. So by definition, a short-term rental is a rental of an entire dwelling unit. So it is somewhat implicit in the definition that the homeowner is not necessarily there when it's being rented out.
Follow up, Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, so my point is the homeowner is not in the house anyways, regardless if he has one house or two houses. So it is, as far as the noise and things, we have police that take care of that. And the other thing I'm concerned about, we have a few people in town that have a couple short-term rentals right now. are we telling these people they have to close the one, like they've kept them up, they've taken care of the building? They even possibly have bought the building to have a short-term rental. So I think there is, if we could have some grace in some of this, because we're like, I've got the emails about people that they bought these for short-term rentals. So, you know, and I know they can change it into an inn if they're in a certain area, but I think on the other hand, I think we're complicating it by doing what we're doing, because I think people are going to try to bypass it by, for instance, having the husband own one house and the wife another, or a child, or like, I think there's ways around what we're doing here. And I think we're asking for people to find a way around it, quite frankly.
Councillor Clifford, before I leave you and go to Councillor Vasilakos, was there a question there for Ms. Bridge?
It was more of a statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vasilakos, and I believe I have Councillor Bunting.
So, and we have already had this discussion. I think when it's your principal residence and you're not, if it's your principal residence and you're there, it's a B&B, and what you're looking for is licensing of a B&B, right? So that there is the option that if you're there and you want to rent rooms out, that you would get a B&B license. The other part of it is when it's your next door neighbors or you live in that neighborhood and you're renting it out, there is a much higher onus for taking care of making sure there isn't noise and stuff, because it is your own neighborhood. It's where you live and it's where your neighbors are. And so I think the other part of it too is we did discuss that if somebody owns buildings as they're essentially commercial properties. Like if you've bought buildings specifically to be short-term rentals, then what you are running is an inn. And it isn't the home sharing Airbnb, which is supposed to be homeowners making a little bit of money off of the property that they live in. And so those do fall under the category of inns. And there are provisions for somebody who decides to commercialize short-term rentals to apply to have a zoning change to make it an inn. I think that, and the other part of it is it's quite simple to see. Principal residence is part of our tax filings, it's part of our health cards, it's part of our driver's licenses. You're probably not going to find a couple that are going to do their taxes and say, we're a couple and we want the tax benefits of being a couple, but by the way, we both live in separate houses like that. I just don't see those kinds of people going to those lengths to try to bypass what should be a fairly straightforward licensing system.
Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos. I believe I have Councillor Bunting and then Councillor Seven.
Thank you, through the chair. I would like an opportunity to address the reasoning behind and I know you've all heard it before, but you're going to hear it again with the permission of the chair. I just want to explain not only to you, but also to anybody in the public who are listening and watching. Would that be okay, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to categorically state that I'm in support of licensing STRs with inspections the same as B&Bs and following the same guidelines as B&Bs for safety purposes and such like, and also other requirements relating to key holders for the principal resident should they not be readily available in the event of a specific situation. Secondly, I'm fully aware of the concern about the shortage of affordable and attainable housing, but putting that on short-term rentals in this situation is tightening the screws, and with this restrictive regulations is not the direction to proceed, in my opinion. With regard to the short-term rentals, if we force the existing short-term rentals to make a decision with regards to, oh, that means we can't operate anymore, you can rest assured that they're probably going to sell it in this particular rather lucrative housing market we're experiencing at the moment, and they won't be turning it into any form of rental whatsoever. As this bylaw exists, it is prohibitive for short-term rentals, and I just want to cover what short-term rentals mean and during the course of my dissertation here. As stated earlier by Councillor Clifford, this could easily result in a great many existing short-term rentals either closing down, the owner selling in the lucrative housing climate, or going underground, or looking at some other way to get around the hurdles included in this proposal. I spoke on many occasions with former manager, Mr. Lunison, and whose philosophy was to use the Toronto model. And also indicated that his philosophy was to tighten the rules really tight, so there's no wiggle room whatsoever, and then release them or relax them at a later date as needed. I don't agree with that particular approach to this. I believe that this is Stratford, it's not Toronto, and I think we need a made in Stratford solution. It's not going to be easy because it is a complicated situation. I can assure each and every one of you that short-term rentals are needed. They are a vital component of our accommodators. I know that the existing short-term rentals this past year were used during the pandemic, more so than anything else. Existing B&Bs have closed. A lot of them have. So we're starting to run short of accommodations. And unfortunately, that is going to have an impact on our economy. Tourism isn't the only show in town. The festival itself is not only a driver, but a significant driver of the tourism sector, and also of our economy. Accommodations are a key component of tourism. And if tourists can't get accommodations within the city of Stratford, they will go elsewhere. They'll be forced to go elsewhere. Short-term rentals were a rising commodity in popularity prior to COVID. And I would respectfully suggest that it is only going to get more so when it is post-COVID. So we do need these. If the potential tourists have to move out of Stratford, what will happen is essentially that they will also spend their money elsewhere, and this will affect our restaurants and our retailers. I've already mentioned some things here, so I'll just pass over it. If the short-term rentals continue to operate illegally, in the event that some of them decide to go that way, in order to gather evidence to bring the owners of such short-term rentals to justice in violation of the city bylaw, will require a lot of work and expense, which equates to more staff, plus a lawyer to present the case before the court, which, if there is a conviction, the fine will likely be a very small percentage of the cost involved to the city for enforcing the bylaw. In my opinion, that's not good economics. It is my understanding that the existing bylaw enforcement officers are kept busy investigating a great many complaints on a variety of infractions. Their approach is to persuade rather than to prosecute. And the last time I asked Mr. Lunison regarding the number of charges in a given year, what was the number? The answer was 0. But having said that, to their credit, the resolution approach was successful in most cases. It is my opinion, again, that we have to create a climate where the vast majority of existing short-term rentals will buy into registering their business within the city and therefore become legitimate operations. I fully understand the need for rules and regulations, and I thank staff for the amount of time and efforts that they've had to that they have completed to come up with this detailed plan. However, I would like to make the motion. I would ask my fellow councillors to consider what I've just said. I'm sure there's more than this. We did all get a letter from Shelley. Gosh, I can't even remember her last name. That's terrible. From the city, she operates a number of businesses within the city, and her situation is different again. So there's so many moving parts in this, and I would ask you to consider these as well in your deliberations as to whether or not we should look at another way of approaching this. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bunting. I have Councillor Seven and then Councillor Basilakos. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I just see Ms. Defoe actually wanted to speak before I do that.
Ms. Defoe.
Through the chair, my apologies. In reviewing previous council meeting minutes from December of 2020, previous council direction was given to staff to add to the comprehensive zoning bylaw the limit of short-term rental accommodations to principal residences for a maximum of 180 days, and that safety inspections be incorporated. So it's my understanding through the procedural bylaw that in order to reconsider this matter, a motion to reconsider would first be required prior to entertaining the motion that is currently on the floor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Basilakos.
And just remind me that a motion to reconsider would have to come from a councillor who voted in support of those of that direction.
So through the chair, that is correct, from 2 members on the prevailing side.
Thank you. So, Councillor Seven, before we go down that road, do you have a comment to make? And then if we want to motion to reconsider, or do you want to make that motion? And
I would like to comment if I could, please, just to weigh in on the discussion. Councillor Vasilakos spoke very eloquently about, I think there are alternatives, and I think I would just like to echo what she said. I don't support changing the recommendation. I think no matter where we draw the line, whether it's principal residence or we say that there's another house, there's going to be those and some who will want to push further. I think the recommendation to me is a fair compromise. I think the big hurdle for me is that I just understand that we do have a need for housing, and I think, you know, every short-term accommodation that is potentially a home that's owned just for short-term accommodation is one that is taken away from a person or a family who needs long-term accommodation. And I think, you know, it only takes one house for somebody or an apartment or whatever it is to make it their home. And I think we have a shortage, and that's been discussed. And I just wouldn't be comfortable expanding it further than the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Seven. So I'm looking to council if there is a motion to reconsider, and once again, we'll have to go on your merit with regards to how you stood in the previous vote. So I'm looking to council for that before we can move forward. So is there a motion to reconsider?
If I could, Chair, it has to be a mover and a seconder who were in the affirmative last time.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, thank you, Mayor Mathis.
For the purposes of discussion, I'll make the motion.
Thank you. And a seconder for that motion. A seconder for that motion. Councillor Gaffney, I see your hand. Thank you. And then I'm going to turn to the clerk to ensure that the numbers of what numbers do we need? So we have a mover and a seconder to reconsider. Is it a 2/3?
Through the chair, it's 2/3 of the whole council, which would be 8 members.
Yes. So, Councillor Bunting, discussion before we call the question?
Just for clarification, we're voting on the 180 days to stand. Am I correct?
There was more to that, and I'll ask the clerk to restate that, if we could.
So through the chair, the motion would be that the December 21st, 2020 council resolution regarding short-term rental accommodations, specifically the provision to limit short-term rental accommodations to principal residences for a maximum of 180 days, and that safety inspections be incorporated as part of the city's licensing process for short-term rentals be reconsidered.
Councillor Bunting, a follow-up?
I'm still not 100% clear what the ramifications are depending on which way we go. So we're voting on the 180 days, or we're looking to rescind that and go back to whatever it was before, which I believe was 120 days. I see Kathy Vasilakos shaking her head.
I'll let the clerk address that.
So through the chair, in order to reconsider this matter, first a motion to reconsider must be passed. Following that, a further motion to rescind or amend that motion could be made or to alter the provisions. But in order to make a further amendment or to rescind it, it has to be reconsidered. So the first part is just to reconsider it, place it on the floor, and then a further amendment could be made.
So this is the first step. And if you're successful, if the motion is successful, then the next step would be rescinding and or altering the motion. Any further questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Burbach?
Thank you. I won't be supporting the rescinding of this motion. I think that the plan as it is currently in the draft bylaws is a good compromise. People will still be able to have short-term accommodations, but we will still be protecting our long-term housing stock. So I won't be supporting rescinding of that.
Reconsidering of that. Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing further, and I'm certainly going to ask the clerk to make sure that we get our numbers correct, I will call the question on the motion to reconsider the motion of December the 21st, 2020, as per the short-term accommodations. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 opposed. So that motion has been defeated. Thank you. We will move forward. Any further Councillor Gaffney?
I apologize to you, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Bunting if I misspoke, but I meant to say that I would think that Councillor Clifford's suggestion from earlier in the meeting about outdoor charging stations or charging station locations probably needs or probably should be turned into a motion. As my understanding of instructions we've received for the past 3 years.
Thank you. Councillor Gaffney, do you want to, Councillor Clifford, would you like to make that motion?
When I talked to staff, what staff suggested that we pass what we got right now and we make an amendment after, it would be a lot simpler. So we don't include it. And I understand from staff, it will be taken back to staff and it'll be brought forward again. That's what I was told anyways.
And I'm looking to the clerk. Thank you.
Through Chair, if we could receive direction to refer this review to staff, that would be appreciated.
So motion to refer to staff and moved by Councillor Clifford, second by Councillor Gaffney. Thank you. Discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Further comments with regards to the document in front of you? Further comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, then moving forward, we have two motions. The first motion is that correspondence dated October the 6th, 2020 from Baker Planning Group regarding the draft comprehensive zoning bylaw July 2021 and 94 Dickinson Place, Stratford be received for information. Mover for that, please, Councillor Vasilako, second by Councillor Henderson. Discussion? All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. And the next item is the recommendation that council adopt the new comprehensive zoning bylaw dated August 24, 21, that council repeal the City of Stratford comprehensive zoning bylaw number 201-2000 in its entirety, that council repeal the Township of Perth East zoning bylaw number 30-1999 as it applies to those lands located within the City of Stratford limits in its entirety, that council repeal the Township of Perth South zoning bylaw number 4-1999 as it applies to those lands located within the city limits, with the exemption of the 2020 annexation lands. The council in accordance with the section 34 bracket 10.0.0.2 of the Planning Act declare all zoning bylaw amendments applications may be submitted before the second anniversary of the day of this bylaw is adopted and the previous bylaws are replaced. And then that the comprehensive zoning bylaw contained amended zoning for 94 Dickinson Place being a R5 bracket 1 zone with site-specific regulations for a maximum height of 15 meters and a maximum density of 100 units per hectare, and that council directs staff to prepare a licensing bylaw for short-term rental accommodations. And is there a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Gaffney, second by Councillor Ingram. Further discussion? Madam Clerk.
Through the chair, if I could just receive some clarification, is it possible to amend the first part of the motion to be that council adopt the new comprehensive zoning bylaw as amended? And then what we'll do is we will add in the resolution of the first motion that was made tonight, just to ensure that that change is reflected.
Thank you. And the mover and the seconder is in support of that. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is unanimous. And once again, as mentioned by a number of the councillors this evening, thank you, Ms. Bridge, Mr. Lunison, and your team for your work on this important document. It's certainly appreciated by council. That goes highly recognized. Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. And moved by Councillor Clifford, second by Councillor Seven. All in favor? Thank you and good evening. We're adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.